Reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 14th chapter, beginning at the 16th verse. Glory be to thee, O Lord. A certain man was preparing a great banquet, and he invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent out his servants to tell those who had been invited, "Come, for everything is now ready." But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, "I have just bought a field, and I must go and see it. Please excuse me." Another said, "I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me." Still another said, "I have just got married, so I cannot come." The servant came back and reported this to his master. The master of the house became angry and ordered his servants, "Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town, and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame." "Sir," the servant said, "what you have ordered has been done, but there is still room." Then the master told his servants, "Go out into the highways and byways, and invite them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise be to thee, O Christ.
And now may the words of my mouth and the thoughts and meditations of all our hearts be now and always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and Redeemer. Amen. A parable has often been described as an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. And the parables of Jesus challenge us just as they challenged those listening to him 2,000 years ago. They often seem to catch us off guard. And of course they're meant to do so. Jesus, the master storyteller, telling stories that pull us into the action, and certainly stories that make us think. In today's reading from Luke's Gospel, Jesus begins with an image we understand at once. The master is giving a great banquet. Before we consider what happens next, you'll hear me say this a lot. Knowing something about the context of first century Palestine is helpful if we understand the social customs of Jesus' day. When somebody decided to hold a great feast or a big social occasion, there would in fact be 2 invitations. The first one would go out to the guests as a sort of, we sometimes get save the date card often for weddings. But the time, whether it was morning, midday or evening, that would not be specified. The second invitation came on the actual day of the event, when a servant would call at all the houses of those invited to remind them, today is the day, everything will be ready for you this evening. There's no indication that anybody refused the first invitation. But when the second invitation came, when the servants showed up at their houses, they all began to make excuses. If you've ever bought a field, you probably went to look at it first. So that seems quite reasonable. If you'd bought 5 yoke of oxen, you would want to try them out and see if they work together. Perhaps the person with possibly the best excuse was the man who, having got married, instantly puts the blame on his wife. Well, that would be understandable. He just did not want to go. None of the invited guests wanted to go. And as we all know, human beings are very good at coming up with excuses for not doing something. And as Christians, we're very good at coming up with excuses for not doing what we know God wants us to do. Imagine opening your post tomorrow and finding a lovely printed invitation, simply worded, Her Majesty the Queen requests the pleasure of your company at a banquet at Buckingham Palace, RSVP. Who would accept such an invitation? Yes? Not many Republicans here this morning. No doubt all of us would gladly accept the Queen's invitation. And to use the examples given in today's parable, we would all inspect our fields and oxen, clear it with our spouse in good time. Nothing would be allowed to stop us from attending such a prestigious event. A little factoid to make you smile. Did you know that when Elton John received his invitation to the wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle at Windsor Castle, apparently Elton John promptly cancelled 2 concerts. He was determined to be there. In today's Gospel reading, Jesus is driving home a truth that was taking place right before his eyes. In the parable, the Master represents God, and the divine invitation to the heavenly banquet has been sent out. The guests originally invited were, of course, the Jews, Jesus' own people. Throughout all their history, the Jews had looked forward to the day when God would break through, and when he did, they refused his invitation and left his table empty. But we all know, do we not, that God never gives up. His invitation goes out to the Gentiles. All are welcome at his table, rich, poor, saint and sinner, all welcome. And finally, I think there's the question of where do you and I fit into this parable? Well, the fact that we're here today suggests that we have already accepted God's invitation. We would be right to see ourselves as guests, but we are also his servants, his messengers. I don't know if you've got a fish sticker on your car. Anybody? No, Christians and Anglicans in particular, we're not always very good at sharing our faith, are we? I think particularly within the Anglican tradition, we like to keep it a bit of a secret. And why should that be the case? Why should it be the case? I've thought about this a lot over the years. And perhaps we don't invite somebody to come along with us to a church service or a church event. The reason we don't ask them is because often I think we might be afraid they'll say no and find an excuse. But it may also just be the case that some of us here today are here today because at some point, perhaps years ago, we accepted somebody's invitation to come and see. That's certainly true in my case. What I take away most of all from this parable is the master's command to his servants that they should go out. Go out into the highways and the byways and invite people to come to the feast, to come and see for themselves with no strings attached. We don't jump on them, put them on any rota as soon as they walk through the door. That's something else Anglicans are good at. So the message could not be clearer. Like the master's servants in today's parable, we shouldn't give up. We should not give up. We have to persevere. And yes, sometimes we have to risk rejection so that others may also have the opportunity to experience life in all its fullness now in this world, and, God willing, to experience the heavenly banquet in the next. Amen.
Amen.